Alright, now that I've got the bearings installed and the crankshaft installed, I'm going to go ahead and set the timing on this thing. Now I've got these screws in here just so I wouldn't lose which ones they were. This timing gear has a dot, a timing dot on the bottom, and there's also a hole in the shaft here which is there to facilitate the use of a tool to insert in the intake and to hold the timing wheel. I found that I've got this screwdriver that has about a 2.5 millimeter shaft here which goes in here perfectly, and it's got a nice point on it. So I just use that and engage it. See, if I pull it out I can rotate this gear and then it just drops right into place, and now that gear can't turn. So I'm going to set my crankshaft at top dead center, and it just so happens to be that that's where the pin that goes through the pinion, or the crankshaft that holds the pinion gear, is at top dead center. So I'm going to hold that at top dead center, put a little bit of oil here so my gasket is held in place. I want to reuse that gasket. Now I'm just going to hold this thing on here like this. I don't need to worry about anything because gravity's holding that screw down. So all I got to do is concentrate on holding my crankshaft at top dead center and just set this in place. Now that it's set in place, I can start running some screws in and check it. Notice I haven't taken my screwdriver out yet. So I'm going to run these screws in. I'm not going to torque them yet. Okay, so crankshaft is still at top dead center. That's in place, so now this engine should be timed properly. We rotate it around. I'm going to put this back in here, and you'll see, hopefully you'll see that that just drops right into place when that hole comes up. And there it is. Crankshaft is at top dead center. So this engine is now properly timed, and we can continue on with the rest of the reassembly. Okay, I've got all my other parts here necessary for the continued installation. Now, as I said in an earlier video, several things. I was never able to actually remove this pin gear here, so I wasn't able to drop the valves. The valves have been cleaned up and they're good anyway, and it has good seal. But the problem with that is that means that when I install this head, I have to have the pushrod tubes in place and the pushrods, because if I can't get this rocker arm out, I can't just drop the pushrod in afterwards. So that's going to make this just a little bit more challenging. The first thing I need to do here, though, is I need to drop my cam followers into place. And I've got them laying here in a little thing of oil. Lubed up and ready to slide right into place here. So cam followers are in place. Okay, so I got them about at the lowest point. The other thing I didn't have is the rubber boots on here were so dry rotted that they pretty much just tore. So what I said I was going to do was I was going to use heat shrink tubing instead. So obviously I haven't shrunk this tubing yet, but what I'm about to try here is the first time I've ever tried to do this type of thing. Is I'm going to put my push rods in here. Actually, what I think I'm going to do is I'm probably going to try and install my push rods up in here like this. And then I've already pre-lubricated my crankshaft here. So that didn't work out like I was hoping. So now I've got my connecting rod on my crankshaft. I've got my, trying to put my push rods. Oops, I'm going to have to leave that on there. Put my push rods in place. Just pull that all the way up there. Might make my life a little bit easier for me. Now, Should be able to rotate this thing down and seat the head. Oops, sorry, I took it out of the field of view there. Okay, so now got those in place. I'm going to start putting some head screws in here real quick and just kind of run them down. I'm not going to torque them yet, I just want to get them engaged. So this thing doesn't fall apart should I start to kind of turn it around. Okay, now one of the things I want to do now is I want to make sure that my pushrod tubes are in position. I'll worry about making sure that my push rods are engaged in there after I've fully run this head down. So now it looks like it's all down. I'm going to go down on one side until it just starts to snug up, then go diagonal to the other screw until it just starts to snug. I'm just going to do this in a diagonal pattern until it just starts to snug up. Okay, they're all just snug. So, starting with the front, I'm going to torque this one down a little bit, snug it up a little bit more, a little bit more. Make sure they're, looks like it's seated all the way around. I haven't done the final torque yet. Now I want to make sure that my push rod is engaged in this rocker. And it is. So now we should be able to rotate this thing. And I hear, sounds like we got pretty good compression. So now what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and put the final torque on here, on his head. I'll torque it with this end like this so that there's no way I can over torque that. It's just not enough leverage to get on there to over torque that. Okay, so the head is now torqued. Oh yeah, I'm going to need the collar on there because that thing's getting really hard to turn. Now, I can rotate these heat shrink, and I could probably go ahead and heat shrink that, but I think what I want to do now is put the rear cover on. Actually, I'm not going to do that just yet. I may go ahead and heat shrink those first. Okay, I've got my heat gun, and I'm just going to shrink this tubing. And done. Heat shrink tubing is shrunk down into place. And if I hadn't told you, you'd probably almost never know that that's what that was. That part's done. So now what I can do is I'm going to put the back plate on. I'm going to use a little bit of Permatex gasket maker because I don't have a replacement gasket for this, so I'm going to get a toothpick and my gasket maker, and we'll make a gasket and reinstall the back plate. Alright, so I've got my Permatex Moto Seal 1 that I'm going to use as my gasket maker for this. All I'm going to do is just put a little bit around this back cover. I don't want to put any on this portion because I don't want to take the chance on getting it inside there, so it's already kind of oozing out here, so I'm just going to kind of paint a little ridge around here. This stuff is resistant to gasoline even. So I've used it on my motorcycles before. And if I work quickly enough, I can get it on there, get this put back together, and then wipe off any excess that squeezes out. I'm not too worried about any of the Permatex getting on the threads of these screws because it'll only act as more of a locking, and doesn't get hard like Loctite, so it's not going to be impossible to get off again. It'll come right off, but it does make a good gasket. Alright, so the back cover is installed now and torqued out. Next is install the carburetor. I've already got the intake manifold gasket there. I'm going to put just a little bit more lube there. Now this one, unlike my 45 Special, because I checked it the other day, this one actually had a spacer on it, which is odd because to me it tells me that they either used a different intake manifold than the one that's on mine, and maybe I should just get mine out and compare them. But so this spacer actually goes in there because I tried fitting it without it and it just doesn't work right. You can see here the intake manifold is fully seated, but yet I still have that gap there, which is what the spacer is for, which is, like I said, it's a little odd because my engine doesn't have, my 45 of my own doesn't have that spacer, so let me see the best way to do that first. Those pins out. Okay, so that was all well and good, except the one thing I didn't do. Oh, that's cool. That thing can sit right there, is I didn't install the choke mechanism, which I need to do. So, choke mechanism just consists of this holder, this slide, and a small Teflon ring that acts as a sealing mechanism that goes right inside there. So, pull. Gasket was installed up here. Got the metal gasket. Let's just do one more little check of the torque here. Okay, that looks good.